Hi guys, Dave from Dave's Boy Shopworks here, and on this episode we are going to show you the basics of starting to block down the side of a truck box that's bare metal with grinder marks all over it. Okay, so before we begin, please like, subscribe, and share. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about sanding, what you're going to do. So you saw in our last video of Brooks Truck Box Revival that we are currently at a skim. I'm looking at it right now, a bare skim of filler. Almost not worth putting on, but so very worth it to get your base right. So we cleaned it down to bare metal. We did a metal prep treatment on it with the POR 15 metal prep, and then we put a light skim of filler. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with some 80 grit right here in a roll, 80 grit, and we're just knocking the tops off of everything with the 80 grit, just kind of opening up the filler a little bit. We got several lines in it. Applying the filler wasn't as smooth as one would say like, but we're going to knock the tops off of everything, and once I get that done, we're moving right to, this should be 120. Yes, 120. What I'm trying to do is minimize the depth of the scratches, so we are going to go 80 grit, 120 grit, 180, 220, and 320. And 320 is where we're leaving it. That's where we want for our primer base anyway. So all I'm going to do is hand sand the whole thing with a block sander. It's just a plain old dura-block, nothing fancy. And we're looking for the dents and the high spots and low spots, essentially. So when it's all bare shiny metal, I personally have no depth perception with it. But follow along and we'll see if we can make this painless and something that some of you might want to attempt on your own. Because anybody can do it. I'm a journeyman automotive mechanic, and if I can pick up a sanding block and give her and not completely screw up. And we're keeping with simple basic technique. Just a simple X pattern. I won't be going in the X the whole time. I'll be going one direction then coming back. It seems to speed things up for me, but here goes. So now something to keep in mind too, your sandpaper. If you look closely, we've got all these little bits of chunk and everything in it. That sandpaper's done. It's not going to cut anymore. Fresh sheet of 80 grit. Alright, so that's a start. You can see some of it's gone chalky white. That means we've gotten that high spot coming down. But we have other areas in between that are still dark. It means they're low. And a couple of areas on the back end, I'll show you later, where I actually have bare metal poking through already. And of course they're high spots. So this box was in some form of an accident, I assume, with a gooseneck trailer or something like that. But anyway, I'm going to keep going on the 80 grit until I get a better base, and I will bring you guys back. So that is everything we're going to do with the 80 grit. It's a little thick down here still, but my transition curve kind of starts to flatten out down here. You probably can't tell on camera, but anyway, what I'm going by is where I'm starting to see metal on the edge. So that's a good place to stop. You don't want to overdo it with the 80 grit because you still have to come in with the lighter grits like 120, 180, 240, that kind of jazz. And if you take too much off with the 80 grit, then you're losing that base and you'll just end up having to reapply all over again. Yeah, so we are ready to go to our next grade of sandpaper. Again, this is 80 grit. 80. And we're going to go with 120. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 sheets used. Yeah, 5 I think. And that's not bad actually. I've gone through a lot more to do a lot less. But you got to get kind of used to the idea that the sandpaper is only as good as it stays clean. And sometimes you can pick those off, but honestly, just go ahead and grab another sheet because you'll get a better overall even finish by keeping the sandpaper in good shape. So something else about your sandpaper. Again, this is 120. This is not a name brand sandpaper. This stuff is literally whatever, probably made in China, don't know, got it off Amazon. Reason being, the cost of sandpaper for rolls like this, for my sanding blocks, 120 grit, last time I checked, was about 110 bucks for this roll, and I think I paid 28 bucks for this. So I can effectively buy 4 of these to go through them all and still have more than I would have had with the one roll. The one roll will last longer than one roll of this, say the 3M gold or whatever sandpaper. One roll of that will last longer than a roll of this, guaranteed. I've used it many times, I like it, it's good stuff. But cost per dollar, I'm using the cheaper stuff. So it's another reason for me to keep on changing and swapping it out and swapping it out. Alright, so now we're getting somewhere. You can see a lot more gray coming through. Now don't worry about these darker filler colors, right? Like, yeah, they're darker, but like I said before, we're trying to find our level. We don't know how straight the box was in the first place, and once we ground all the paint off, which this was paint. All of that. Just layer after layer. So once we ground all that off, now up here we're showing bare metal, so we're not really concentrating up here anymore. This is in a good enough spot. Down here starting to cloud out some metal, which means that the filler is just a super thin coat now. It's a little bit thick here, but I am catching my metal edge down here. So we're going to end up probably applying a little bit more, but we are done on this section with our 120. So now this kind of accelerates now. We did the hard work with the 80 grit. The 120 we finished shaping and blending down. Now we're going to go to our 180 and just give it a once over, probably about 30, 40, 140 strokes, whatever, just to blend this area. Now I hope you can see that. I can see it on the viewer lens, but all these little, it looks like a leopard skin. Well, that's all the marks that the grinder left. And it doesn't matter what way you position a grinder, it's going to leave some marks one way, some marks another way. You can try and go consistent as you want, but at the end of the day, that's what we got. So, we are looking beauty. And that's just one piece of 180. And I sped up the time, but it only took about, 5 minutes. See, like, that's what I mean by it starts to go faster. Once you're down to the smoothing and you're past the major shaping, it really starts to go fast. I got a little bit over here, but with the curvature swinging out here, like there's no curve here, but here it starts to flare out. So we're going to try and work on that just a little bit more. But then we are going to the 220, and we'll see what we have after that. Alright, so that's where we want to leave it for 220. I'm just going to quickly go over it with the 320, and then we're probably going to call that part good until I get the rest of this box blended. Alright guys, that's pretty much it for this section from here to about here. And this feels good. Now, right here, definitely going to need some more attention. But if you look, we haven't really broadened this out too much, so that means our level is still decent. Now, here's a low spot. I can see by the little chunkies. High spot, high spot, high spot, high spot, high spot, low spot, low, low. But we're not worried about that, because what we're going to do now that we have an actual base for this side, I can come in and I can properly apply filler at different thicknesses to get all these little areas, get them all tidied up, and that's gonna make for a really smooth and hopefully a nice glossy, non-ripply finish. There's nothing worse than looking down the side of a freshly painted vehicle and seeing it waving at you, you know? So by doing it this way by hand with a simple block sander and time, it's probably taken me about 2 hours. Yeah, about 2.5 hours to get from really rough skim coat to a base that we can actually properly work with. And when we're done, well, you'll see the results here because we will have this in paint. So guys, thanks for watching part 4 of the truck box revival, and stay tuned for part 5 where we're gonna have this thing that much closer to getting into primer. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand this is not the whole truck box. This is to give you guys an idea of how we're working it. So if you all choose, some of you might think it's too difficult or it's too hard. Well, trust me, if I can do it, there's no reason why you guys can't do it. A few simple basics and you're off and running, and follow the process. You will have good results. Alright, thanks very much. Have a good night.